How's it going, everybody? This is the Figuring It Out Finance Podcast, episode number 27. I'm your host, Chris Rickenbaugh, and I am just getting started in my real estate journey. I've worked on my own house. I bought it as a primary and then hired contractors to be able to fix it up, pull out my money, and now starting on my first flip, which is a week and a half in at this point. And then I have a couple other meetings set up for purchasing subject to maybe another flip. So getting started on this real estate journey, I've been able to raise some money or raise $35,000 in less than 10 days. So that's a little bit about me, but I am back again with another book of the week and book review. So this week, before I get into it, follow me on all the socials. So TikTok, Instagram, at Figuring Out Finance, figuringoutfinance.com. Go check that out as well, where you can sign up for my newsletter and stay up to date on everything I'm doing, as well as finding out some tips and tricks in the travel hacking space, which I'll be getting more into here. But today, going into the book of the week, it is The Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. So I was expecting something a little bit different out of this book. I was expecting a little bit more of the step-by-step, like, hey, here's how you do something, here's how a millionaire thinks, and it really wasn't along that line. You know, I've read a couple lately to where it's like, oh, that's a little bit different than what I thought it was originally. So, it's fun to read those books because it kind of takes you by surprise and makes you really think. And this is one of those books that really got me thinking, because it really kind of drives into the point that I talk about quite a bit, and that's just having your own opinion, who you're listening to, who your friends are, and just having that deeper level of purpose and meaning behind what you're doing. And it's not just on the surface level of, oh, I want $10,000 a month. It's, why do you want that $10,000 a month? And it's not just to travel. It's not just to have a cool car. It's way, way deeper than that. So that's what this book gets into and really makes you break down and think. So getting into it here. So like I said, it doesn't talk about the specific habits, but the main takeaway that I got was about the mindset you need to have to be open to making money and living the life the way you want to live. So it's also about developing the vision and the end goal to give yourself a destination and not just work and make money. So I'll get to that a little bit later in the podcast near the end. So number one here is in the beginning of the book, he talks about what is your why. So what is your true purpose? So this is something Dean Graziosi really talks about with his students as the 7 levels deep test. So 7 levels deep, it's asking why 7 times. So you get past the why do you want $1 million? It's like, okay, that's why do you want $1 million? Oh, because so I can travel and live for free. It's like, okay, well, why do you want to travel and live for free? Well, you start to bring out those deeper questions and purposes, and he goes and talks about in the book about, how there is a much deeper level of purpose that is driving you, and this exercise is going to be able to get you there, because by about the 5th or 6th why, you're answering these questions from a lot deeper than just that surface level of, why do you want $1 million just to travel and have a nice car? And that's where when he went through this exercise the first time with his coach, he got emotional in front of a lot of people and his students, and it was just really, really deep and emotional. And that's where that 7 questions and 7 questions of why really gets to you. So really interesting. So definitely check out the book and listen to him and all the stories that he talks about from his students when he does this exercise with them as well. So, and the next part here is setting your goals and destination. So this is going to be a really big one that I talk about on the podcast today. It's because steering yourself in the right direction by focusing on the things you actually want to do That's what you're doing by setting that clear goal and destination. Because if you always focus on the things you don't want to do, that is always where your mind is going to, or that's where your mind will go to. So if you're always focusing on the 10 bad things that could happen in your next real estate transaction, that's where your mind's going to go, and it's going to scare you out of doing that deal. So that's also with relationships, dating. If you keep focusing on all the negative, you're never going to be able to focus on the positive and have a good experience out of that. You're always going to be thinking about the worst case scenario and just all of the negatives. So, and again, most people are just lacking the crystal clear vision of where they want to go in life, because they've never really sat down and thought about why they want that $1 million. It's probably just a cool number. And I dealt with that with my old boss as well. He said, man, I think it would be so cool to hit $1 million a year. I'm like, yeah, but we don't really have business. It's like, why do we want that $1 million? It's like, getting there is one thing, but being able to build a business that does that year over year and maintains, it's like, why do we want that $1 million? You know, is it just for the ego to say, hey, we make $1 million? Is it to live the life you want to live? Is it to donate? Like, those are all those questions rather than I want $1 million a year. So having that crystal clear vision of where you're going, it's all right. I'm past the money. If money wasn't an object, what would I be doing? So you get past the traveling. What are you going to be doing? And that's going to be really personal for everybody else. And this is a really funny one, or a funny side note, but most people do this in their business, but they don't do it in their social life. Because one of the other books I read, I think I've referred to it a couple times here, but he talks about how he met his wife. So he was out in the dating game, and he's like, man, I really don't want to mess around. So what he did was he wrote down like 3 to 5 pages, I believe, of what his perfect spouse would be. How she looked, talked, acted, every little detail about what she was. And then he said, now I have to go become that person as well. And what do you know? He ended up marrying the person that he wrote about in that exact thing. So that's something that I did with my girlfriend, actually. And it's like, I went back and looked at it after we started dating, and it's like, wow. It's like what I wrote then detailed this perfectly. And she did the same thing. So what I did in my mind, and what the other author in the book did, what you did was you gave yourself a destination and a roadmap to exactly what you want. And you could have kept that personal, but what happened was you set your mind on that route, and then your mind just kind of non-actively starts looking for it, and everything else kind of fades away. And that's something that's really interesting to do, because it's not just about a business of having that crystal clear vision. It's about your life and your relationships and everything you want to do. And that's so powerful. And it's so interesting to see when you can say something and write it down and have a vision board. And then 5 years later, you look back at that vision board that was from 5 to 10 years ago, and you're like, wow, a lot of that has come true. And I know Brandon Turner talks about that on his podcast as well, about his vision board, like about his garden and his house and living in Maui. So really, really interesting there. And I highly recommend doing that and saying what your life is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. So another one of the quotes here in the book is, if you don't have a vision and clarity on the destination you want to reach, you'll simply never get there. So I'm going to tie that in with working hard. So a lot of people go to their jobs or they have their own businesses and they're just working really, really hard. And one of the great quotes from the book that also ties into this is, fast is only good when you have the right path. Otherwise, all you do is get lost quicker. So what you're doing is you're setting that destination for yourself, and that gives you the ability to work really hard and sprint. So a lot of people start sprinting before they find that or define the destination. I cannot talk today. So before they they start running and sprinting before they define the destination of where they want to go. So Brian Lubin has a great analogy to this is when you get in the car with your family and, you put your head down, start working, start driving 100 miles an hour, and then the smoke starts popping up from the hood and you pull over and you realize your family's not there. They left miles ago. So that's what you're doing in your business, is that you're sprinting so hard, you're not understanding and not really developing those skills because you don't have a destination. You're just running in one direction and all the different directions. You're not moving towards anything. So for me, what that is how do I start a business right now since I left my job where I was going to be making a lot less money than I'm going to here. But what I did was I'm like, all right, well, how do I get a business that pays all my expenses? I'm going to be living for cheap and house hacking that I'm still doing here. I'm still looking for cheaper housing, like always. But how can I have a business that pays for all of my expenses? And that I can save a little. So right now I'm thinking, all right, that's about $60,000. So once this flip is completed, I'm going to be ending up making about $15,000 to $25,000, depending on how the financing ends up working out. So $15,000 to $25,000. I'm already over a third of the way there in doing that. So, it's like all I have to do is 3 of these, and this first one went really, really good. Less than 3 weeks, the project's done. It's like I only have to do that 3 times a year, and I'm going to make more than my salary. That's a lot less work. So I'm not working extremely, extremely hard. All I'm doing is documenting what I'm doing here, and then I'm building up those small deals on the side. So it can pop off at any time, but what I did was I gave myself a destination. Like, hey, I don't want to be that guy that's in the office from 6 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night. Like, that's not my life. How can I make enough to be able to survive off of? And then how do I slowly grow that into $80,000 to $100,000 a year? And then that's where it starts getting fun, because that's where I'm taking the money and I'm, hanging on to the properties instead of flipping and selling them. So I'm going to repeat that quote again about working hard is fast is only good when you have the right path. Otherwise, all you do is get lost quicker. So to wrap that section up, have the vision and the clarity and the exact destination where you want to go. Things can change along the route, but you need to be able to develop that destination to be able to get the clear vision of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, moving on to the next big topic in Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi is about the villain within and the stories we tell ourselves. So this is another one that I really hype on because this is something I figured out when I started reading a lot more, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, and developing my own opinion. So what it talks about in the book is focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses. This is more of the first part of this about the villain within. So everybody talks about in your interview, well, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Kind of a dumb question in my opinion. But your strengths, what they talk about is you should be focusing everything on your strengths. If you say you have weaknesses, it's like, hey, I'm just not very good at that area. Can I get better? Yes, but what would really be beneficial for me and the company is that we get somebody that's better in my weakness area. That way, we're going to be able to make a really good team. So say you're not very organized, but you're a doer. You could go lights out, put your head down and work really hard, but you're not organized. So getting somebody who is organized and maybe not a grinder like you guys are going to mesh really, really well because you're going to be able to work really, really hard and you're going to be able to put these things together, these deals, and you're going to have somebody on your side organizing everything that you're bringing in, writing down notes, putting deals together, more accurate numbers, and you guys are going to be a really, really good team. That's focusing on your strength because you're going to be able to do more. So if you took away from what your strength was and worked on your weaknesses, you're going to be really, really average. And, it's just not the most beneficial area. You could always get better, but it's better to be able to work on your strengths instead of, going all in, figuring out where you're weak, because there's always going to be little weaknesses. Just hire it out. So, moving into the next topic, the stories we tell ourselves. So this is something I heard in a Bigger Pockets podcast, and the lady was talking about the stories we tell ourselves, and that was something that didn't really make sense to me at that time. I'm like, maybe she's just kind of like making up her own thing and, talking about, just trying to get something going. But this book really detailed that, and he really talks about what are the stories we tell ourselves, and a lot of it revolves around bad advice. So the quote in the book is, "Bad advice is the most costly advice in the world because we are learning from the wrong people." So when Dean was traveling around, he was talking to all these students who, hadn't performed. They've been talked out of doing something, out of that real estate deal, out of the businesses, going and studying, or their dreams, all because it was bad advice. And what he says in the book is, it wasn't the lack of knowledge, experience, or money that was holding them back. Rather, each and every one of them had a basket of bad advice delivered by somebody, and it robbed them of their courage to take action towards their next level of life. And he goes on to say, you can't take advice from people who have failed at what you want to accomplish. They only know how to do it wrong, and they'll put the wrong spin on any advice they give you. So all in all, if you're, say for me, I'm just going to relate it to my example here. I was looking to get into real estate. So obviously everybody and their brother is going to have their opinion on it. You talk about hard money, somebody's going to say, oh, that's a scam, whether they know what they're talking about it or not, because they probably think it's a loan shark with a baseball bat. That's not what it is. And once you get to learn and understand that and talk to these people, it's a lot less scary. So it's just educating yourself on that topic, and it's going to be a lot less scary. So if you've done the reading, you've done the education, meetups, whatever else you do, you're going to be able to understand these things, and you have to take advice from people that are doing what you want to do and that are successful. Because, they've made mistakes along the way too, but they've had somebody along their side, or they've been able to learn from it, and they're teaching you what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how you fix it, because they're not going to let you make that same mistake. And that's why reading books are so important, because they're talking about all these mistakes they've made. And it's so funny when you're reading a book and you're going through something at that same thing, and it's literally written in this book word for word how it's going through in your mind, and they're like, this is why this is wrong, do this. And a lot of business books, like The Simple Path to Wealth, The Road Less Stupid was like that in business for me. It was just an eye-opening book. Awesome. Best business book I ever read. But going back to the story here in Millionaire Success Habits, why are you getting that unqualified advice? I'm not going to go to somebody investing in stocks and ask them about real estate. They're going to think, oh, it's scary, oh, it doesn't work, or they don't know about it. I can't take their opinion. I'm going to go to a wealthy real estate investor and say, hey, what did you say? I'm going to ask for relationship advice, not from my single best friends. I'm going to go and ask somebody who's been married for a long time and who has a great relationship that I look up to. And that's the same with friends. Who are you looking up to in your friend group? Are you looking up to that person who's out drinking, who, just kind of sounds cool? Or are you talking about the person who's got their life together and working, they're motivated, and they put in the time and effort at their sports or their craft, or just in school in general? So learn not to take the unqualified advice and talk to the people who have done the thing that you're wanting to do and have done it successfully, not somebody that's just going to be giving you bad advice. So just to kind of finish out that part, it's when you follow the same path as everyone else, you get where everybody else has been. So don't take that same path. So one of the best quotes in this book here are the Great Depression mindset. So a lot of people's money habits, I'm going to be tying this back into money now, and credit cards as well. So hang in for this story and this little piece. I know we're running about 20 minutes here, but if you go to your grandparents and you're starting to talk about money, you've basically been passed down your whole life with somebody, say your parents and your grandparents. Your parents taught you. So who did they listen to? They listened to their parents. So if they didn't develop their own opinion and they're just repeating what grandma and grandpa said, you're listening to somebody with somebody's mindset from the Great Depression. So that's something that I read in an earlier book. It's like, why am I listening to these people who grew up, in the 40s through like World War II? It's like we are in such a completely different time period. Like we're talking about cryptocurrency. Like that's not even related. Everybody from that generation is going to have no idea. They're going to think it's scary. So they're not going to be open to that. And that's the same thing with credit cards. So when credit cards were invented and how credit was invented, it was after the world wars when they wanted to boost the economy. So nobody had money. The economy was really bad. So what they did, they were able to give you this money on a plastic card that you could go spend, way past what you have, and that's going to boost the economy. It's going to give people and businesses money, and it's going to help the economy, which it did. So when people talk about credit and building credit now, one of my friends, he had his grandma said something like, was trying to teach him how to have really good credit. And it's like, okay, well, you need to buy this toolbox because you need to have one. And you're gonna make payments on it every month. So it's like, all right, so that's probably a $200 payment. And then he's like, well, you should also get a car, and then you're going to be making the payments on that as well. And that's going to make you have really good credit. So all these things that they're telling you that you're going to have great credit. This is going to build your credit. It's like, all you're doing is putting yourself in debt. So you've added $500 or more a month to your normal spending that you could be saving with something paid off. If you paid in cash and you're not making those $500 a month payments, like it just drives me insane when I hear people talk about this. Like, well, it's going to be so much better. All I have to do is make a $300 payment every month. Like, that's crazy. Like, just pay it off. I'm not all on the Dave Ramsey train, but I understand the assets versus liabilities, and you're going to be saving more money in the end of the day if you're not if you're saving $200 a month rather than paying $200. So that's just back in your pocket. So that's just my story on it. But we're getting a lot of bad advice from people with the Great Depression mindset and who grew up in that era. Like, it's just completely different. Talk to the people who are doing really, really good in this generation. And that's what you can get from podcasts as well. So, that's wrapping up about half the book. I could go on and on and on about this book. I loved it. But in the second half, I'll just kind of give a brief description. It talks a lot about marketing and selling and the specifics of that, like not selling past the sale. So, and what scarcity thinking does to us. And at the end, Dean breaks down the actionable steps and habits about the millionaire success habits, which is what I was expecting the entire book to be about. It was just near the end. So developing, the understanding the villain within, and then the stories we tell ourselves, and being able to learn from that and understand them and use them to be able to grow. We're not taking bad advice from people, and then to understand your why, your deep purpose and passion about why you're doing what you want, whether that's financial freedom, relationships, anything in life. That's a lot of what this book talks about. The Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. I highly, highly recommend you checking it out, whether you read it or audiobook it, whatever you do. But I appreciate you tuning in today. Go check me out on figuringitoutfinance.com, as well as Instagram and TikTok at figuringitoutfinance. Chris Rickenbaugh is my name, and I am signing off for this episode of the Figuring It Out Finance podcast. We'll see you next time.